Hey there, welcome back. Tonight, we have a calm and beautiful story, The Journey of Odysseus. We'll begin in just a moment, but before we do, write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing how far our little storytelling circle reaches. And if you enjoy what I do here, consider liking this video or even subscribing. It truly means a lot to me. Thank you. Now, let's begin tonight's story. In the distant past, when the world was young and the gods still wandered among mortals, there was a small, peaceful island in the Ionian Sea. It was called Ithaca, a land of soft hills, olive groves, and blue waters that sparkled in the sunlight. On this island lived a wise and clever man named Odysseus. Odysseus was not just a king, but a man loved by his people. He ruled not with harsh commands, but with reason and care. The people of Ithaca worked their fields, fished their waters, and raised their children in peace. Odysseus himself found great joy in quiet moments, walking among the olive trees, listening to the breeze, or watching his wife, Penelope, weave at her loom. Penelope was known across the isles for her beauty, grace, and calm spirit. She and Odysseus were deeply in love, bound not just by affection, but by shared wisdom and trust. They had a son, Telemachus, a baby with wide eyes who would someday grow to be a brave young man. Odysseus often carried the child in his arms, pointing to the sea and telling him of the stars, the winds, and the faraway places beyond the horizon. At night, the family sat together in the flickering firelight, and Odysseus would speak of the old tales, of gods, monsters, and heroes long gone. Ithaca was not rich in gold, but in these moments, it was richer than any kingdom. Far across the sea, a great conflict began to rise, a war born from pride, promises, and stolen love. The city of Troy had taken Helen, queen of Sparta, and the kings of Greece, once bound by oaths of brotherhood, were summoned to bring her home. Among those called was Odysseus. He did not wish to leave. His heart was tied to Ithaca, to Penelope, and to the little boy who now walked beside him, holding his hand. Odysseus even tried to stay behind, feigning madness. But in time, he was recognized for who he was, a man of reason, not madness. Bound by honor, he could not refuse the call. The day of departure came. The sun hung low over the sea, casting golden light on the quiet harbor. Penelope stood still, her face calm but her hands trembling. Telemachus, still too young to understand, clutched at his father's robes. Odysseus knelt, holding the child close. He whispered promises that he would return, that he would not forget. Then he stood, turned, and boarded his ship. The sails were raised, and the wind caught them gently. Ithaca began to shrink behind him, its hills softening in the distance. And so began the first step of a journey that would last not months or years, but decades. The war against Troy raged for 10 long years. Odysseus fought bravely, though he was known more for his wit than his sword. He counseled kings, avoided needless battles, and led with cleverness. But the walls of Troy stood tall, and many Greek warriors began to despair. It was Odysseus who devised the final plan, a great wooden horse, hollow on the inside, left as a gift to the Trojans. The Greeks pretended to sail away, leaving the horse behind. The Trojans, believing the war was over, pulled the horse into their city. That night, beneath the silent moon, Greek soldiers emerged from the horse's belly and opened the gates. Troy burned. The war was ended, but not without cost. Thousands had died, cities had fallen, Hearts had been broken. Odysseus, weary from battle, gathered his men. He longed for Ithaca, for Penelope, for Telemachus, for the sound of home. With 12 ships under his command, he set sail into the open sea, dreaming of the green hills and calm shores he had not seen in a decade. But the sea does not always welcome dreamers. After leaving Troy, Odysseus and his men came to the land of the Cicones, allies of the Trojans. At first, they raided and celebrated, taking food and wine. But the Cicones returned with more warriors, fierce and prepared. A battle broke out on the shore. Odysseus called for retreat, but his men, filled with pride and drink, delayed too long. Many were lost before the ships pushed off again, oars cutting through red-stained water. Silence fell over the fleet, a silence that clung like morning fog. It was a bitter lesson, one that would echo again and again. The sea rewards humility, not arrogance. Days later, they reached a strange, dreamy island where the air was thick with perfume and the sun never seemed to set. This was the land of the lotus eaters, where people lived in endless peace, sustained by the sweet flowers of the lotus plant. Those who ate the lotus forgot their homes, their names, even the reason they sailed. They smiled softly, laid down in the warm grass, and wished only to sleep. Some of Odysseus's men ate the flower. They laughed, empty of memory. But Odysseus, wise and firm, carried them back to the ships by hand. He tied them to the benches, not out of cruelty, but mercy. And they sailed on, hearts heavier than before. They next arrived at a green island with tall cliffs and bleating goats. Beyond it lay a darker, wilder place, home to the Cyclopes, giant shepherds with one eye each who lived alone and knew nothing of kindness. Odysseus, curious, led a group to explore. They found a cave, vast and echoing, where cheeses and lambs were stored, but its master, Polyphemus, soon returned. He blocked the entrance with a massive stone and began to eat the men one by one. Odysseus waited. He offered wine, strong and sweet. The Cyclops drank and slept. Then, with a sharpened log, they struck, blinding the monster. In the dark, they escaped by clinging to the undersides of his sheep. But as they fled, Odysseus shouted his name, an act of pride. And the Cyclops called to his father, Poseidon, god of the sea. From that moment on, Poseidon's wrath would follow them like a shadow. After days of rough sailing, they reached the floating island of Aeolus, keeper of the winds. Aeolus welcomed Odysseus with feasts and stories, and gifted him a bag of wind, every storm sealed inside to help him reach home. For 9 days, they sailed smoothly. Ithaca was in sight. But as Odysseus slept, his crew grew greedy. They thought the bag held gold. They opened it and unleashed the storms. The winds howled. The ships were thrown backward across the sea. When they returned to Aeolus, he turned them away. "The gods are against you," he said, and shut his gates. The sea took them next to a harbor surrounded by tall cliffs. It seemed calm, but it was not. This was the land of the Lestrygonians, giants who hurled boulders like stones. They destroyed the ships, crushing them with monstrous hands. Screams echoed. Men vanished beneath waves. Only one ship survived, Odysseus's own. The rest were lost forever. Odysseus did not speak. He simply sailed onward, his crew smaller, the sea wider. Their next stop was the island of Aea, where lived the sorceress Circe. Her home was hidden among trees, and wolves and lions lounged around her door, not fierce, but calm, enchanted. She welcomed Odysseus's men and turned them into pigs with a flick of her wand. Odysseus, guided by Hermes, resisted her magic. He demanded his men be restored. Circe, moved by his courage, agreed. She became a friend, a host, and for a full year they stayed, eating, resting, healing. But the sea called again, and Circe gave one final instruction. Before he could reach Ithaca, Odysseus must journey to the land of the dead. Odysseus sailed to the edge of the world, where the sun no longer shone and the sea turned to black glass. There, he dug a trench and poured offerings of honey, milk, and blood to summon the dead. The spirits rose like mist. Among them came Tiresias, the blind prophet, who warned of the trials ahead. "Do not harm the cattle of the sun," he said. "Resist temptation, endure." Odysseus saw his mother, who had died of grief, and she spoke gently of Ithaca and Penelope's sorrow. He saw old comrades from Troy, Achilles, still noble, and Agamemnon, still bitter. Their voices lingered like wind through reeds. When the last spirit faded, Odysseus covered the trench and returned to his ship. The world of the living felt strange, as though time itself had paused and resumed only as they raised sail once more. Next, they neared the island of the Sirens. These creatures did not attack with claws or teeth. They sang, and their song was beautiful beyond description. It promised knowledge, peace, love, and forgotten truths. Circe had warned Odysseus. He plugged his men's ears with wax, but asked to hear the song himself. They tied him to the mast. As they passed, the Sirens sang. Odysseus wept and pleaded, desperate to join them. But his men rowed on. The music faded, leaving only the sound of the waves and the creak of the mast. The ropes left marks on his skin, but he was alive. They had passed unharmed. Soon they entered a narrow strait, where two terrors awaited. On one side loomed Scylla, a monster with 6 serpent heads. On the other, Charybdis, a whirlpool that drank the sea and spewed it out again. Odysseus chose the lesser evil. He sailed near Scylla. As they passed, her heads darted down. 6 men were taken, without time for a cry. Odysseus could do nothing but grip the helm and guide them through. Behind them, Charybdis roared, but ahead, the sea calmed once more. At last, they came to the island of Thrinacia, where the sacred cattle of the sun, god Helios, grazed. Odysseus warned his men, do not touch them. For a month, storms kept them stranded. Food ran low. And when Odysseus slept, his men, driven by hunger and despair, killed the cattle. When they left the island, Zeus punished them. A bolt split the sky. The ship shattered. All were lost, save Odysseus. He floated alone, clinging to the wreckage. The sea, endless and empty, carried him on. Days later, he washed up on the island of Ogygia. There lived Calypso, a nymph with a voice like waves and a heart full of longing. She healed him. She offered him a place beside her, forever, even immortality. For 7 years, he stayed. But each day he stood by the shore, staring west. The gods watched. And one day, Hermes came with a message from Zeus. Calypso let him go. She helped him build a raft and watched, silent and sorrowful, as he disappeared into the horizon. Her island faded, but her kindness stayed with him. The sea tossed Odysseus once more, and he might have drowned, but the gods still watched. Poseidon sent storms, but Athena sent help. Odysseus was thrown ashore on the island of the Phaeacians. There he was found by Princess Nausicaa, who brought him to her father, King Alcinous. The Phaeacians welcomed Odysseus. They clothed him, fed him, and asked for his tale. He told it all, from Troy to Circe, the Cyclops, the Sirens, and the dead. As he spoke, the whole grew silent. Even the fire seemed to listen. Alcinous was moved. He gave Odysseus treasures, a new ship, and a promise. We will carry you home. That night, as he slept on soft linens, the sea carried him to Ithaca at last. Odysseus awoke on a beach he did not recognize. Ithaca had changed, or he had. Athena came to him in the guise of a shepherd. She smiled and revealed the truth. Together, they planned his return. She disguised him as a beggar, old, bent, and dusty. He made his way to his palace, walking with slow steps. No one recognized him, but the land did. The cliffs, the trees, the wind, they whispered to him. He was home. Inside the palace, Penelope remained faithful. For 20 years, she had waited. Suitors filled her halls, loud and greedy. They pressed her to choose one. She delayed, weaving a shroud by day and unraveling it at night. Odysseus entered in silence. He saw the suitors, the servants, the shadows of his life. He spoke with his son, now a man. Telemachus listened and believed. Penelope, unaware, announced a final test. Whoever can string my husband's bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads shall be my husband. One by one, the suitors failed. The bow would not bend. Then, the beggar stepped forward. Laughter echoed, but he lifted the bow easily. He strung it. He pulled. The arrow flew straight, true, and perfect. The room froze. Odysseus stood tall, no longer a beggar. The suitors were dealt with. Justice came. Not with rage, but with silence and finality. Penelope, cautious, still tested him. "Tell me of our bed," she said. Odysseus spoke of how it was carved from a living tree, how it could not be moved. Her eyes filled with tears. He was home. And that, dear listener, is where our story rests tonight. Sleep well.